Okay, good evening and welcome to the special Motzei Shabbos edition of Just Daf It, Daf Yomi Share. We're doing Daf Kuf Aleph number 101 in Kesubos. We're finishing the 11th parak today, pretty special. The name of this year is called Just Daf It, which really comes from, it's a play on the words Just Do It, which is the slogan of Nike. Apparently the person who came up with the slogan just passed away. Or maybe it was an old article my father sent me about the person who came up with the slogan. Where did it come from? Just do it. Where did that come from? I was reading the article. It said that it actually came from a person who was being executed um, for capital punishment in America in the 1970s in Utah, where I guess the capital punishment was they were shooting him, firing squad it's called, and they asked him what his last words were before he was going to be killed, and he said, "Let's do it." This guy is being executed, being murdered, he's dying at the end of his life. Let's do it. He was inspired by those words, and he jotted down on a paper, do it, or something like that, and then eventually added on just. That's where it comes from being executed. I guess you have to feel that way if you're good at sports, right? You got to feel like if you don't win this game, it's the end of your life. Jordan felt like that. Jordan was the ultimate competitor. The story Jordan, I saw an interview with Kobe Bryant. Allah Shalom, Kobe Bryant. Um, it's not a joke that he died. It's funny to say Allah Shalom about someone who's not Jewish. But Kobe Bryant was having dinner with Michael Jordan, and Michael was telling him, he said, "Kobe, one on one, I could beat you. I could take you one on one." I guess he was in his prime, maybe he said that. So Kobe said to him, he said, "Mike, let's just enjoy the salad." Even years after he retired, he was still thinking about Kobe. I could have taken you one on one. Anyway, let's just do it. That's Nike. Let's get started. The bottom, Kofim Bees. About like 10 lines up for the Mishnah. The Mishnah on the bottom. Mishnah says, "Hamamanis Hashniya Va'ilinis Ein Lehen Ksuba." If you hear some noise in the background, it's probably people screaming out Arabos, Arabos. Not as Arabo. Selling Arabos. People make big bucks on Arabos. Hamamanis Hashniya Va'ilinis Ein Lehen Ksuba V'lo Peres V'lo V'lo Blos. 3 ladies. She's Mamanis. She's somebody who was a katana. She was married off by her brother or her mother as a katana, and she's refusing the marriage. She leaves the marriage. She doesn't go to Kesuba. She never became a gedola. Hashniya, someone who got married to someone usher an erva midrabana. The Gemara in Yevamos and Daf Chaf Aleph lists different women that usher midrabana. You marry a woman like that, they penalize you the rabbanan. No Kesuba. For her, the islandness. We're talking about a case where you don't know the woman's an islandess. Basically, she has some of the simanim of not being a fully developed woman. She's not a fully developed woman. In addition, she can't have children. Ein ksuva v'lo peres and ksuva. We'll see. Ksuva really means the mana masayim, right? The basic principle of ksuva, which I mentioned is del raisa. Stay tuned for Ian Ben Sion. We'll discuss the significance of the ksuva being del raisa here, specifically in this Mishnah. V'lo peres v'lo blos. Also, the Tanaim Darabanan they instituted, she gets payros, really referring to what she gets for giving him payros. She gets to be redeemed per kona, velo mazonos. She doesn't get any sustenance from him. Velo blows, the Gemara will discuss what that means. She doesn't really get normally when she brings in property to a marriage. So when she leaves the marriage, even if the husband was entitled to use clothing she brought into the marriage, if it's worn out and the marriage, dissipates, either it's divorced or someone dies, or he dies, so she'll get back those clothes. The Gemara will discuss the difference between Nichsis on Barzel and Nichsim. We'll look at different types of property that she brings into the marriage. So if you're one of these 3 marriages, it's not a real marriage, not a full marriage, therefore you don't get those things. However, if he knew that she was an islandess going into the marriage, and then she has a ksua because he knowingly said, "I'll marry this woman," even though she technically never will be a fully developed woman. Almar l'kohen gadol grusha chalus l'kohen hedyot mamzeres nesina l'Yisrael b'Yisrael and nesina l'mamzer yesh lahem ksuba. These are all lavim. If you learn Masechah, he's almost familiar with these cases. A kohen gadol can't marry a woman who's previously been married, and a kohen can't marry a grusha, right? Kohen gadol can marry. A kohen gadol can't marry even if the husband died. A kohen can marry if they die. Husband died, but if she was gara, she was divorced, then he can't marry her. Chalutza, he can't marry a chalutza. Also, Rabbanan, mamzeres and nesina like Yisrael, right? Yisrael can't marry a woman who's a mamzeres or a nesina. Discuss when nesina is Tzachas Vamos. And similarly, a Jewish woman can't marry a man who's a mamzer or a nesin. However, if they do get married, there is a ksuba. Principally, monomasayim yash. They get, right? But do they get, are the takonas derabanan of ksuba, right? Mizonos, peiros, perkona, krura, ksuvasa. Are those things in effect or not? The Mishnah doesn't tell you about that. And the Gemara doesn't even discuss this. If you want to find out, I didn't even look at this, but Arshkel mentions the Rush and the Ran do discuss this, whether you would get the other entitlements of the marriage. Ksuva, the basic ksuva is monomasayim, the mount for a ksuva. What about the other things? Would you get that or not? That is discussed by the Rishonim. I will tell you my opinion. I have not seen the Rishonim, but I will tell you I think my clear opinion about whether those apply over here or not, based on the lumdus of the Yimut Ben Sion. It basically is a dissection of this mission to discuss the difference in the first three cases and the last cases in the Mishnah. The Gemara says, Rav Tani Ktana Yosef beget in Laksuva, the Kol Shekem Menes. Rav learned a Ktana, a girl who gets married as a Ktana by her mother or her brother, right? Yotze beget, if she's Yotze beget, right? She only needs a get if, right, she got married to the guy Midoraisa. You don't need a get. There's no get for a Ktana. If she does me and there's no get, the get is not effective. So it's the way I'm explaining the Gemara. I don't know how exactly the article, I don't think it explains it like this, but the way I'm explaining it, Ktana Yotze beget, that she grows up, she becomes a 12-year-old girl, and they don't formally do a Kedusha, but they continue living together, right? So according to Rav, that's not effective. It's not an effective marriage. It doesn't make marriage, and therefore she's not entitled to ksuba. Even if he's megarish, she has to megarish her because they live together, right? And ein adam osa bilas mustama, the husband, even when she became a gedola, he had be a l'shem kedushin, and she's a gedola at that point. So they got married. However, she's not entitled to a ksuba because she never formally did a kinyan nisuin, right, to make a marriage. Certainly when she's a ktana and she ends the marriage, she gets nothing. So that marriage is worthless as a ktana. Shmuel tani menes ein laksuva. If she ends the marriage as a ktana, she doesn't laksuva. However, yesh laksuva. Shmuel holds that they got married. Obviously, once she reaches bat mitzvah age, they got married. They continue living together, and therefore automatically she's entitled to a ksuva. As a Shmuel tameh, Shmuel goes according to his own reasoning. Damar Shmuel menes ein laksuva. Yotze beget yesh laksuva. He lists following differences between a menes and a yotze beget. If she's a menes, she ends the marriage as a ktana. She doesn't get a ksuva. Yotze beget, she gets a ksuva, as he said before. Menes lo pasam and achen. If she refuses her husband before she turns bar mitzvah, so it wasn't a real marriage. So therefore, she doesn't become usher. Doesn't become. If there's yibum over there, she wouldn't passel for the achim, right? If the right, when a woman falls from menes to yibum, right? So maybe it's even the rabbanon because they're married with the rabbanon. So that if someone did chalitza to her, or gave her a get or a maimer or thing like that, a get or a chalitza, it wouldn't pass on achin. Lo pasim in akuna, right? And if she does mia, it doesn't pass on the guna. We learn in Sechas Gittin that if you give a get to a woman, so she can't marry a kohen, miyun doesn't have that same effect. Yotze beget pasam in achin and pasam in akuna. She does get a get. Again, I'm talking about the way I'm explaining it is that she got married. She's 12 years old now, so therefore it would pasal in achin and akuna. Menes ena stricha lahamtin shlosha chadash. Menes, if she ends the marriage as a ktana really can't have a baby. It's machloket. The Gemara says really 11-year-old girl could technically become pregnant, but most cases the Chum say maybe we're not worried that she becomes pregnant. Shemaim Yerachmal, it's zakana if she gets pregnant. So ena stricha lahamtin shlosha chadashim. They're instituted Masechas Zivamos that when you get married to a new man, you have to wait 3 months in order to figure out if you had a child from the second husband. You want to make sure it's from the second husband. You know who the father is, the second husband or the first husband. Yotza the get shricha lahamdin shlosh chadashim on top of kuf aleph and aleph. If she leaves with a get, so she has to wait shlosh chadashim because she obviously left when she was already 12 years old, so she could have had a child from the first one. My kamashma was the chiddush Shmuel saying all these things. Hanina kula. We taught all these things in a previous mishnah. If she refuses a man before she comes to a mitzvah, right? So there's no isra on the krovim. Usually, if you get married, you're mekadeshes to a woman, or right. So she is usher in your krovim, and your brother, your father, your son, and you're usher in her sister, mother, and daughter. But if they never formally got married, it ended out of katnos when they were young. So she doesn't mean it's not the same thing as a get. Not something like get, but if not something like get, it gives her a get, meaning they ended the marriage after she became 12 years old. Who also then it was a real gerish, right? She's Gureshes, she also a Kohen. So the answer is the last part of Shmuel said that she has to wait 3 chadashim. That's the chiddush. Telosna, that wasn't stated in the Mishnah in Yevamos. It didn't say they have to wait 3 chadashim, even though it's probably obvious, right? She's married to the guy as a gedola. She could become impregnated. Maybe we shouldn't worry about that, but because only Xer Darabana. Nonetheless, they were worried about that. Lema Ketanai. Say the machlokas Rav and Shmuel is the same machlokas as machlos Tanaim. What's the machlos Tanaim? As follows: Lezer Omer ein ma'isa ktana klum. The ma'isa of ktana, meaning a girl gets married underage, under the age of bat mitzvah, it's ineffective. Ein ba'al zakah means also below ma'isa da. A husband normally gets her findings or her wages, or he knows her nadarim. Eino yarsha, eino mitbala. Here he wouldn't get these things, and he wouldn't inherit her if she died. And he's not matame. If he's a kohen, he wouldn't go matame. Kohen is matame for his wife, but she's not his wife. She needs miyah. The marriage of a ketana is effective. It's effective, just like right a regular marriage. The husband is entitled to all these things. He's entitled to them. Also, her yarsha mitmala. He inherits her if she dies, and he's matamet her. She leaves a miyah. Now, presumably, the Machlokes Yisrael and Rabbi Yeshua is also talking about, like I said, obviously they're not talking about when she's still a ketana. There's no marriage is Rabbanan. There's no marriage. I don't think the husband would be entitled to Ma'aseh Adem and Siyasa and things like that. We're talking about where there was no formal arrangement once she became a Gedola. Do we say that the Ma'aseh Ketana is klum, that she got married, then he's suing? Definitely the Kiddushin took effect because, right, like the Gemara says that Adam Yodea Shein Bilaz in Adam Osa Bilasa Bilaz. So the husband, when she became a Gedola, he intended to be Makadish her. However, in Nisuin, which is a different kinyan, all these things are dependent on Nisuin, so they didn't formally recognize that, so are they married or not? So that's the Machlokes Yisrael and Rabbi Yeshua. Shua says yes, it takes effect after, right? Is like his wife, meaning if when she was a youngster, right, she's yotzev mian, right? Now obviously she'll be able to get. Lema Rav the Amar Lezer, but Shmuel the Amar Rabbi Yeshua. Say Rav says like Rabbi Lezer and Shmuel says like Rabbi Yeshua. Right? Rav says basically that we don't assume a marriage just because they were boel as a gedola, unless they had a formal agreement. And Shmuel says we do. Ali the Mar says Ali with Rabbi Lezer kuli amalo pligi. Everyone agrees. Right, Lezer says what he says. It will be according to everybody. Really, Rav and Shmuel argue in the sheet of Rabbi Yeshua. The reason that the Gemara says is because it's usually passed like Rabbi Yeshua, not like Rabbi Lezer. Lezer was called the Shmusi. It's from Beis Shammai. So everyone can go according to Rabbi Yeshua. Shmuel, Rabbi Yeshua. Shmuel obviously sounds like Rabbi Yeshua. They have a marriage. Rav the Adkan the Rabbi Yeshua Hasam Elam Medido Lidei. Right, Rabbi Yeshua only said over there from things that go from her to him. Meaning Maisei Adeh, things that belong to her, her earnings, her wages, whatever she finds, her afaras and darim, they transfer to the husband. They were masaki in that, even though they didn't have a formal marriage, they were masaki in that it's good enough that he should get those things from her. Our mission, however, when it comes to other things, right, when it comes to the fact that like Rav and Shmuel had an argument about whether she gets her ksuba or not, that he has to give her the ksuba. So that on that, that's what Rav argues. Rav says no, she's not entitled to that, right? He's entitled to, because at the end of the day, right, it makes sense, right? He was the one. He's not bold. He knows he's getting married to this woman. The woman never consented really to get married, so he accepted her as a wife, so he gets from her, but she never really accepted him as a husband. So she's not really into the marriage. Why she's not thinking marriage, so she's not entitled to the ksuba, which is usually a product of the marriage. Below blows, she doesn't get blows, which is worn out clothing. Amalei Rav Huna Bar Chil Rav Kahana Amar Mishmei de Shmuel Lo Shama Lo Nichsem Muluk. Shmuel said the Mishnah is only talking about Nichsem Muluk, right? She has clothing she brings in. Obviously, men's clothing. She's not going to wear men's clothing. She has men's clothing. Her father owns a clothing store. He owns Gap. I don't know. So she had a lot of Gap sweatshirts over there. Nichsem Muluk. Nichsem on Barzel Isla. Nichsem on Barzel, meaning when they make a contract, they write in the ksuba, I'm giving you 100 Gap sweatshirts, and you better pay me back when this marriage is out. I want 100 Gap sweatshirts back. So if he wears those and they become worn out, not only does she get back 100 new Gap sweatshirts, she also gets back the worn out ones. Heavy bit of Papa. Rav Papa asked, Ahaya, what is the same as Shmuel going on? It's talking about Mima Enes, right? That he makes a chiluk between the blows of Nichsei Son Bars and Nichsei Malug. If they're around the blows, they're still around, they're intact, they're not completely worn out. ID by ID Shakla. Right? There was no marriage in the first place. She took it. There's no real Nichsei Malug Nichsei Bars. If they don't exist anymore, ID Lo Shakla. If they're completely worn out, so there's nothing to take. It's not worth anything. Ella Islandess. Let's say it's going on the second case. ID Shakla. If they're around an islandess, again, islandess is where he didn't know she was an islandess. It's a mekach tos. He didn't know. He didn't want to marry. He didn't want to marry a woman who's not going to mature into a woman. She can't have children. She's not going to have the body of a woman. If they're not really present, they're not worth anything. Maybe you can use them for other things. You can make them into silos for your nair, like the Gemara Shabbos says. You can make them into wicks for your candles for Neres Chanukah. Nichsei Malug, the Reshusakaim, like I've explained before, Nichsei Malug are more in her possession, right? He and her share the shalo, the bilos over. The Reshusa is in her Reshus, right? She controls, right? He only eats the payros, right? She's in her Reshus. Kai Isla. Nichsei Son Barzal, the Lab Reshusay Kaim Isla, right? If there's worn out stuff that not fit for anything, so she shouldn't get Nichsei on Barzal, she should get Nichsei Muluk. That's what makes more sense to get. Ella Ashniya. Unless we talk about the third case in the Mishnah, a woman who gets married to an Erev Midrabanan, the Kansa Rabbanan Lida B'didei or Didei B'dida. The reason, like the Gemara says, it makes more sense that the blows, the worn out clothing Nichsei Muluk that she brought in, she didn't make any formal agreement with him, she should get. Nichsei Son Barzal, he should get because she's giving it to him. That was worn out, at least he gets the one. He has to pay back 100 new Gap sweatshirts. At least the ones he used, she get to keep the old ones. So since they wanted to make things confusing for a shnia, they did. She violated the words of the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan said don't marry a shnia, and they got married anyway. So the Rabbanan made a knas, they made a fine, and they said even though something normally which should belong to the man goes to the woman, the woman goes to the man. So therefore, that's why Shmuel said over here that when it comes to Nichsei Malug, is that what she loses, even though that really should belong to her. They gave that to the husband. Nichsei Son Barzal should belong to him. They gave that to the wife. Amar Rav Simi Barashi, Shmami Nambad Rav Kahana, Aidale Glima Karna Heavy. We can infer from Rav Kahana says that if she brings in a Gap sweatshirt, a piece of clothing, Karna Heavy, right? We discussed that Nichsei Malug, there's payros, there's the goof, and there's the payros. So you bring a piece of land, right? The piece of land, the wife really is in her rishos, and the fruits he eats. So, right, when it comes to clothing also, so wearing a clothing, is that considered the Karen? Is that considered the land? Or is that considered the fruits, the warmth of the clothing? So from Kahana, that is considered Karna heavy. and the husband doesn't have a right to just wear the clothing for Nichsim Maluk. If it wasn't, this is on bar that she gave it to him. Contractually, she gave it to him. He has to pay her back. But Nichsim Maluk, if it's Karen, so he has no right to use it. Only Peros has the right to use it. So he doesn't have the right to use it until it gets worn out. And that's why the Gemara says over here that Nichsim Maluk, that in terms of clothing over here, the Nichsim Maluk, technically it belongs to her. And they made a knas that he should keep it. Belongs to her, meaning that it's called Karen, it's called principal, and not Piros, not fruits. Amar Rav Nachman Pira Heavy. The Gemara says Rav Nachman elsewhere said that using clothing is considered fruits. It's like not considered the land itself. The Azal the ball, you could wear it until it gets worn out. Amar Rav Nachman Pira Heavy. The Gemara says Rav Nachman Plika. Rav Nachman did state that it's considered Piros. Rav Nachman and Rav Kana argue about this fact. Ein lahen ksuba. They don't have ksuba. Amar Shmuel l'shanu alamonu ma'asayim. They don't have a ksuba. These first three ladies in the Mishnah, the principal ksuba, if he agreed to give her more money, right, more than the actual 100 or 200, she does that. She does get that. Tanya Nami Hachi, we learn likewise in a brayse, and they do get the extra amount that he promised. He promised it. The brayse continues, other women, that they're supposed to leave a marriage without a ksuba. Discussed in Parak Hamadi, the 7th parak, right? She's a veras al das. She is violating laws of the Torah or violating laws of tznius. She loses her ksuba. Not only does she lose the Osayim, she also loses the tosefes. Let's say there's a bad name going about her, that she committed adultery. It's not sure, there's a rumor going around, so she leaves the marriage. Now tell us ma'ashel fanav yotze. Now, she's not entitled to the ksuba, but she does get to keep her nichsei maluk. What was hers, her land, now she brought into land, she gets to take that out. Rav Huna supports Rav Huna. Rav Huna, zinsa lo ifsida bloseha, the top of Kufal of the is bloseha kayamin. If she's mazana, even if she's mazana, for sure she's mazana, certainly when there's just a rumor, she doesn't lose when she leaves the marriage. Obviously, adultery ends the marriage. You have to get divorced from her. Midoraisa, she doesn't lose the worn out clothing that she brought. Even if he was wearing the clothing, if there's still remnants, still wearable, she gets to take it. Which I'm assuming in the regular, unless stated elsewhere, stated otherwise, it means nichsei maluk. Tani Rav Nachman, zinsa hisida b'oseh chayamin. Tana taught in front of Rav Nachman that she does lose it. Amalei, imi zinsa kaleh mizanai. It doesn't make sense. She, with her body, committed znus. She committed adultery. Why is her clothing penalized? Her clothing belongs to her father's house. Shouldn't be penalized for that. Took her clothes off probably when they did this nuts, when she was promiscuous. Tani lo hefsida blosech, change the words of the brisa that she doesn't lose her blosech. Amar Rav Baruchana, Amar Yochanan, zu divrei Menachem stimosa, right? This version that says that she loses her blosech, that's the opinion of an anonymous Tana of Menachem. Chum say she doesn't lose it, just like what Rav Nachman said, fix the word of the brisa. According to this version, you don't have to fix the words of the brisa. We just attribute the brisa to an anonymous author, a yachid, a singular opinion, who's not the chachamim who argue on him. Mitchila nasa, if she knew she was an island, right? So then she does have ksuba. Amar Rav Huna, island is isha ve'ena isha. An island is sometimes considered a wife, sometimes not a wife. Almana isha gmura. And Almana is always considered a wife. Island is isha ve'ena isha. What does that mean? Hikirba, if he knew she was an island going in, yesh laksuba, she's a wife. Lo hikirba, he didn't know she was an island. It's a mekaktos. You never would want to marry a woman who can't have children, who doesn't develop a normal woman's body. In laksuba, she doesn't have ksuba. Almana, isha gmura. And Almana, however, is a complete lady. Bein hikirba, bein lo hikirba. If he's a kohen gadol, he thought she was a psula. Whether he knows she's an almana, or he thought she's a psula, yesh laksuba. Even if she sort of tricked him, she has a ksuba. Rav Yehuda Amar, achazu isha ve'ena isha hikir ba yesh ksuba, lo hikir ba yesh ksuba. Similarly, just like an island as an almana, if he thinks that she's really a psula, and she's not, and he finds out afterwards that, her hymen wasn't there, so she doesn't have a ksuba, the marriage is null and void. It's a mekakto, it's mesiveh. So it's an opinion, machlokes Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda. So the more I asked on Rav Huna shita mesiveh, concept chazkas she came. Right? He got married to her, assuming that she's a psula. V'nim says she came. Yesh laksuba, and she's a psula. Of course, she has a ksuba. Hastama. So what's the inference from this from this brisa. Hastama, right? Ein la ksuva. If he doesn't know, right? He doesn't know if she's a psula or an almana, and he finds out she's an almana. She was together with another man before. She doesn't have a ksuva, which would argue on Rav Huna. And the rest is lo tema hastama ein la ksuva el ema konsa b'cheskas she'ena kain v'nimse shehi kain ein la ksuva. Right? The Brisa means to say is that if he assumed that for sure, he thought for sure, not that he was ambiguous, he didn't know or he didn't care or he didn't think about it. He knows that she's not. And him says she came ein la ksuva. He thought she's not an almana, and she was an almana. She doesn't have a ksuva. Al stama. But if he was ambiguous, he didn't think about it, he didn't consider it, even though afterwards he tells he's not happy about it. Al stama my isla. So what are you going to say? Stama, if he's not sure, she does have it. Atani b'cheska she came. V'nim says she came. Instead of the Bryce saying he thought she was a psula and she was a psula, yesh like ksuva. L'shmin and stama. Tell a bigger chiddush. Right, a case where he's not sure, and certainly where he thinks she's a psula, and she's a psula. The ode, furthermore, Tani konsa biyadua v'nimseis biyadua yesh laksuva. It says explicitly if he knows, right, that he knows she's a psula and she's a psula, she has a ksuva, or he knows she's an almana and she's an almana, she has a ksuva. Konsa stam ein la ksuva. However, if he's ambiguous about it, he doesn't know, and he finds out afterwards he thought she was a psula and she's an almana. She doesn't get a ksuva. Tiyufsa de Rav Huna. So the Gemara says, yeah, it's a refutation of the shita of Rav Huna. And now the Gemara explains why Rav Huna made a mistake. Rav Huna masnisin he got mistaken by our mission. The words are our mission. Who's savar with the kamaflik ba'islandist to the kamaflik ba'almana? Our mission said a distinction between islandist and by an islandist. Islandist normally doesn't get a ksuva. However, if he knows she's an islandist, then she does get a ksuva. The lo kamaflik ba'almana. Then the Mishnah went on to discuss an almana. It didn't say, right, the two different cases by almana. Even if it was a mekach tos, he thought she was a psula and she ended up being almana, she would get a ksuva. Velohi, he has sounded that almana plugged the islandess kai, even though it didn't make the distinction by an almana. Almana was continuation of islandess, and whatever halach applied to islandess applies to almana also. Hadron halach almana nizonis. New parak. I know it says isha paskimo. Gets married to a woman with a daughter. Obviously he likes the woman a lot. If you marry her, you're going to support the daughter. And he promises to support the daughter for 5 years, with food and I guess clothing. Then they got divorced. Didn't last so well. The woman with another child in the marriage. He had his own children. She's a catchy lady. People like this woman. I don't know. Maybe she's very attractive. So, she knows how to talk her way into another marriage. So, she marries another man. And he also promises to support her daughter for 5 years. He also is obligated to feed her 5 years. So, the first person, now, the second marriage can happen after 2 years. And he still has 3 years left to feed her, right? He can't say when she comes to my house, right? She comes to my house to visit me, Azuna. Then I'll feed her. He has to send her food to where her mother is, even though her mother's with a different man. Two husbands can't, right? The previous husband and the now husband, the present husband, can't say, all right, we both promise 5 years of support for the daughter. We'll join together and we'll just support her together. We'll each pay half. The current husband, he feeds her because he's in the house. He buys food for her. The other one gives her the amount of money that it would take to feed her. She gets a good deal of this. It's a nice allowance. This is a baal. Let's say she got married, this girl, right? This daughter. So her husband now has to give her mazonos. The two stepfathers, they give Dmei mazonos, the money that would mazonos. She has a nice parnasa. Mesu, if they die, these stepfathers, their own daughters, right? These stepfathers, their own daughters, that they have biological daughters, they only get nechasim ben chor. They can only take mazonos, right? The daughters get mazonos from the estate of their father, but they can only take from unencumbered land, from land that didn't have a lien on it. It says in Mesechus Gittin that it can only take ben chor. However, this stepdaughter, her ex-stepdaughter, not even married anymore to the mother, and then he died, right? They collect nechasim mishubadim, right? Even from property at lien on it. When he obligated, we'll see in the Gemara what his obligation, how he obligated himself to her. Was it a written contract, orally? We'll talk about that. So she's like a balas chov. It's like there was a loan he owed to her, and a baal chov collection of the shubadim. I take a shvua. Everyone goes into a marriage thinking, this is going to be a blissful marriage. The marriage will last forever. But the smart ones knew, you write the prenup, he wrote in the prenup, I'm only guaranteeing you to support your daughter when you're with me. So if I die or you die, or we get divorced, that contract expires. The Gemara says, person says to his friend, I'm obligated to give you a mana, $100. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayev, just by saying it, apparently, he's Chayev to give it to him. Shlokish Amar Potter. Shlokish said he's not obligated. Hechidami. What's the case? There were bystanders there. Yeah, normally you need two Adam to prove something. So he says to the two bystanders, he said, you're the witnesses over here. He makes them, he designates them as Adam. Right? My time with the Reish Lakish. What's the reason Reish Lakish? You have two valid Adam. So he said it in front of Adam, so that is contractually binding. They got potter. Why should I potter? If he didn't really make Adam, right? Adam just see things that really aren't good Adam. My time with Rabbi Yochanan, why Rabbi Yochanan say he's chayav to pay? He didn't do it. So the way our school translates, he actually writes in a star in a document. He writes, I owe you, and I owe you $100. But it wasn't signed by Adam. He just wrote it in a star. The other way to explain this Gemara, he actually said, I am obligating you a mana that could be written down in a star. We'll talk about this more tomorrow, the next year. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayev, Rabbi Yochanan is Chayev. Alima Milsa the star, command Amar Lom Atam Adam. I'm just going to use the R school way of explaining it, make it simpler. Right? He actually wrote in a star, and I owe you. So a star is like saying to people, you are the witnesses, bystanders. Right? It's not significant, the rights and IOU, unless it's signed by Adam. Our Mishnah says he contractually obligates himself to feed the stepdaughter for 5 years. My love, aren't we talking about, right? This case is Machlokas Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, right? Doesn't say how he obligates himself, right? It must be an IOU. So it's Machlokas, right? And it says he's Chayev. It must be like Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So the Gemara answers, Kuf Bezim and Aleph, Lo Bishtari Psiksa Ukter Gidal. The Gemara deflects the proof. The Gemara says really the obligation that he obligates himself to the stepdaughter is something called Shtari Psiksa, which I'm going to translate as a prenup. A prenup, and we'll see what Rav Gidal said about a prenup. It's a contractual obligation which even can take effect even when a regular loan doesn't have full force. At certain times, the prenup has more force than an actual loan just by writing an IOU or saying it should be written in a star, which I'll explain tomorrow, maybe in Ian Ben Sion. That is more significant than, is as significant as really a loan document with two valid Adam on it. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. So here we're talking about Shtar Psiksa, which is a unique case. Rav Gidal talks about it. We'll get into this tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed tonight's shir. See you on Ian Ben Sion, where we discuss the fundamental difference, the Reisha and the Seifa of the previous Mishnah. Coming up next.